your support for the Untold Radio Network family of shows and join in on the conversation by using super stickers and super chats on YouTube. Got a question you want answered? Ask it live via a super chat and get real-time responses from our show's knowledgeable hosts and guests. Help keep the Untold Radio Network shows running strong. We need your support. Send your super chats and stickers now.
Well, hello, world. No matter what time it is, it is now time for Down South Anomalies. And this is the Untold Radio Network. My name is Jade Katz.
And I'm Miss Basia.
And we always state that we are broadcasting on stolen land, and we want to respect and pay our acknowledgements to elders past, present, and emerging, the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation. Eora, thank you for that pronunciation. That's why I'm no longer on SBS.
Yes, that's right.
Today we have one of the most profound guests. I know I always say this.
We always have profound
guests. We've been working up to this interview now for quite a few years, chiseling at this director, this extraordinary musician, this one of the world's most prolific authors.
He's a raconteur, isn't he?
We have been chiseling at him. And there was a story he told us years ago that is one of the most profound.
Made the hair on the back of my neck stand on end.
It certainly did. This is the astounding Gary Keady.
That's right.
One of Australia's greatest directors and one of the greatest cult directors. I don't think this man ever appeared in Not Quite Hollywood. I think Tarantino missed out on you, Gary. Is that right?
Well, it wasn't Tarantino who did that.
Yeah, I got it in Ozploitation, I think.
Right, okay. Now, your sound's a bit choppy there, but we should be all right. Maybe if you lower it down, it sounds like it's getting a little bit distorted. Gary is, as I said before, he is the director of one of Australia's most incredible cult films, Sons of Steel, with our version of David Bowie, Jeff Duff, in there. He is an incredible musician that has worked all across the world with remarkable stories. He is a prolific author. Has written a whole group of books based on the film Sons of Steel. Sons of Steel has just been released in the US. We're going to go into all this stuff. But Gary has an incredible story that we'll get to after we set up his back history. And that has to do with the incredible early mid-19th century explorer Percy Fawcett, a lightning strike. Going down into the Amazon in search of El Dorado and so much more. He's doing extensive research at the moment into the Bunyip and what in the hell the Bunyip is. And so we're excited to have you, Gary. How are you?
I'm good. I didn't know Asper had a hairy neck. She said the hairs on the back of her neck stood up.
Desperately.
They did.
Are we coming to you? Your studio looks amazing. Is that part of your studio, your workspace behind you there?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. You're only seeing part of it. It's massive in terms of junk. Well, to some people, they call it junk, but I call it treasure, of course.
I
wonder why we're getting clipping with your sound. I wonder if we could make that any... Yeah, maybe if you just can turn the volume down a little bit, just a tiny bit. Yeah, it's very frustrating.
How's that? Is that better?
Maybe a tiny bit better. Maybe what we'll do, Gary, we'll start off with your history because you come from a very musical family. Your brother's also a musician. And is that where your creativity, your work career started before you were a film director and became one of our most maverick creators of cult cinema in Australia?
Yeah, I think it's a natural transition. I started out as a poet, actually, in the 60s, going up to Paddington, sitting in shop windows and reading my poetry to those that wanted to listen, who were few and far between. But that was a kind of a thing back then, and standing on a box down at the Domain and yelling out all of my socialist-type theories and enjoying every protest I could be a member of. I was very anti-establishment. I took the Australian government to court against conscription and won.
Wow.
Matter of fact, while I was in court, the big case with Townsend was in the other room, which was the one that got the press. That he was a guy that Townsend had his show on television, so there was all this flag about him.
Simon Townsend,
was
yeah.
the big like,
yeah. And my case finished before him, and they used it as a precedent, so he got off.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, so I was kind of, I was lucky I had a barrister that I went to school with. He was a couple of years ahead of me, and he got me off. So that was all good because I was bound for Vietnam, and I didn't believe in that at the time.
No.
Still don't.
My parents my brother was just coming to age at that stage as well, and we had conscription in this country, and my parents were absolutely horrified.
Freaked out.
How astounding. Were your parents this way in thinking? Were they left of centre as well? Were they radicals in a way?
No, that's probably why I was a radical. I mean, my mother played the piano badly. Very heavy left hand on the bass and everything, but she was kind of the musical trigger for us all, because wherever we went, if there was a piano, she'd be on it, right? And
right.
And so we'd find ourselves down the south coast in pubs or after closing with mum hammering away some horrible tune on the piano and all these people singing along, and it was just wonderful. Those were the days, and that was in sort of melted into the fabric of my brother and myself. He's 8 years younger than me. And then poetry, what started out as poetry at school, led to being in bands. I was in a bunch of bands coming out of school. The Banshees, Mr. Miller's Mystical Music Machine, and a whole bunch of these widow bands. And then they became sort of, those bands were playing cover songs and things because that's all you could do in order to get a gig. You had to play other people's songs. And then slowly that evolved into me trying to write songs. And then my poetry merged with that. So that all made sense and became very protesting. So I got into sort of like protest songs, not Dylan sort, more I don't know, early Floyd sort of thing, and Uriah Heep, heavy protest stuff, because I like heavy music. So that's where I went. But all the time I was with the family business. The family business was opal mining. My dad used to drive in the late 40s and early 50s all the way from Sydney to Cooper Pedy and Andamuka in Central Australia across dirt roads, and then live in a hole in the ground, a dugout, and get opal and bring it back and cut it in Sydney. And so I was raised in that industry, and then I travelled the world selling opals and stuff. So I was at an early age, 17, after I left school, and 18, I was travelling the world selling opals and coming back to Australia with all of this incredible knowledge, which was only useful to me because nobody wanted to know about it, really. So that was part of the trigger, I suppose.
Did your dad do all right with the opal mining? Did he ever strike it really big?
Yeah, he was. He'd buy opal from the miners, and he became. There's a street named after him in Cooper Pedy, Keady Street. He was the first person to take opals to Japan after the end of the war.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he's quite famous as one of the pioneers of the opal industry. He turned 100 last week.
Congratulations to him. How astounding,
Oh, absolutely. Oh, he's been a mentor to my life. He's the man that stood there when I said, I can't be in the family business anymore. I want to pursue a life in the creative industries. And he said, follow your dreams, my boy.
Right.
Well, there you go. They weren't so much radicals, but that's very radical thinking for that time, because
it's radical thinking for now, because people have children and they've got a plan. They've got a map for them of what they're going to do when they grow up.
Yeah.
And if the family's got a business, it's like, well, it's going to take over the business because I've worked so hard for this business, and now my protege's got to take it over and keep it going. And nobody asks the kids what they want to do.
Precisely.
Do they?
There must be a
Yeah.
there must be a stockpile of music that you've been involved in, many records and many musicians throughout this country. I mean, that was a wild time, Australia in the 70s for music. You had
was a wild
incredible
time everywhere.
festivals starting Sunbury and all those sorts of things. Maybe tell us a little bit about that time and what other musicians you would spend time with.
Well, I gave Tommy Emmanuel one of his first sessions as in session player. I left Australia in '73 and went to America with a guy, John Phelps. John Phelps was the keyboard player from the Brisbane Avengers, who had a few hits. John and I started writing songs together. He was the barman at the Cauldron. So I used to hang in the Cauldron. I'd come home from a trip to across around the world. I used to launch off, and I'd go Sydney, Hong Kong, sell opals, Hong Kong, Tokyo, sell opals, catch Lufthansa across the pole into Frankfurt, Germany, sell opals. As a matter of fact, I used to go up into the cockpit and see the pilot who was shooting the stars through a periscope to get over the pole in those days, because they didn't have digital navigation and they had to shoot the stars because the magnetics affected all their instruments.
Wow.
So just, that was a 707 flying over the pole. Then I'd take the train and I'd go down to Ida Oberstein in southern Germany, and then I'd take the train to Geneva, and then I'd go across to London, and then from London to New York to San Francisco, Hawaii, Sydney. And I'd do that once every 4 months or something. And so I ended up in the Cauldron with all of this rubbish in my head from everything I was seeing around the world, talking after the bar and close to the barman.
Wow.
You kind of end up, part of the fabric of the place. And, at that time I was driving one of the only 2 Ferraris in Sydney. I was a bit of a trendsetter, and I used to wear a gun, because we had to go to the opal fields all the time. And
I was going to ask you about that. Was it dangerous traveling the world selling opals? Was it something you had to protect yourself? Obviously, now you're telling us it is.
Oh, yeah. I had a bag with a couple of $100,000 worth of cut stones in it, cut opals, and I had to be very careful. Matter of fact, one time I was running across Victoria Street in Hong Kong, and the bag flipped open, my briefcase flipped open, and everything fell over in the middle of the street, and there was a tram coming towards me. I'm picking it all up, trying to put it in my bag as this tram's coming towards me.
Wow.
So I got a new briefcase after that.
I bet.
Yeah, travel. Look, it was just amazing traveling the world. I mean, going to New York in 1971, 72, 73, going into London. I never ever really sold much in Hatton Garden, the jewelry centre of London, but I used to go there and I'd get all my clothes. I'd go to Carnaby Street and all that, and I'd just shop, and I'd come back with all the latest fashion and all this. And it was a time where there was this music everywhere. And everywhere I went was a different form of music that was just happening, because the explosion was such that in the creative industries that everything was brand new. You could come up with something new. Today you're flat out doing that. It's all been done.
Yeah.
Well, not only that, today it's really hard. You've got to really do a lot of work. The hunter-seeker mentality is back to actually find where the gold is, because there's just everyone is a musician. Everyone's an artist. Everyone's a technician, when sometimes not everyone is.
No.
You know what I mean? So I think that wow. For our American viewers and listeners, it was a rare thing for an Australian to actually have a gun on them at that stage.
It's a
in the
rare
70s,
thing
still is
now.
today.
Yeah.
So how exciting is that?
Well, one time we had an opal mine.
Did you ever shoot anyone?
No,
Oh.
nearly.
Nearly.
We had an opal mine up near Eromanga in Western Queensland. I mean, it's any further away and you're on your way back again. It's a long way away. Right?
Okay.
Yeah.
And I was on the back of a truck one night and I saw lights bouncing on the horizon. We slept on a tray of a truck, and these were min lights, and I saw 3 of them appear, and
Mhm.
they swirled, and then I said to my partner there, "Oh, look at this, right?" And we're watching these lights, and then they bounced on the horizon. Boom, boom, boom. It was just bizarre,
Wow.
right? Then they got
Mhm.
really big, got small, and then they went gone, zip, right? And about a week later, we had a camp there, an open cut opal mine with bulldozers and everything, and 23 men working there. And the one of the guys cleaved the cook's head with a meat cleaver. Didn't kill him, but he hit him in the head with a meat cleaver.
On
They
purpose?
had
Or
a
accidentally?
misunderstanding over the
All
food.
right. Right.
So
okay.
I was sent
Wow.
up to fire him. This is a week after the Midnight experience.
Mm-hmm.
So I was sent up with my partner to fire him, and I had to sit in the campsite with my briefcase open and my gun on him to get him to sign some documentation to withdraw, because he was one of the directors of the company. So I had the gun on him because he cleaved the cook. This guy was off the rails.
Yeah.
I mean, these people that live in seclusion, isolation, and wear jumpers in 55-degree heat Celsius, digging opal with picks and shovels, which is what this guy did before he became part of a bigger organization, are a little bit twisted, but in a way that is special, because he could say, well, over that mountain there's a flat top, and in that flat top we'll find opal. And he was right 9 times out of 10. He knew. Right. So anyhow, I had to fire him. So I fired him, and he laughed. And we got in the Land Rover, and we drove to our rough airstrip where we had a Piper Cherokee, our own aircraft. And we got in that, and the pilot went down to the end, turned to face the wind so we could lift off. And as we were roaring down the runway, this guy drove onto the runway in the Land Rover and turned it towards us. So the pilot had to go, whoa, and pull the plane up, and we bounced over it. And his finger came out the window like that.
Wow.
Wow. See, people...
experience with
people overseas would not realize that Coober Pedy is literally
this is in Queensland.
But when we talk about that opal, we're going into towns and areas that are distinctly the wild west.
Absolutely.
They're
our wild west.
I think in Coober Pedy places, am I right to say there was no tax laws, that you actually were able to sell what you found? But you were lucky to actually scalp your spot, because late at night someone could throw dynamite down there whilst you're in there mining. You know.
Oh, you had to hide everything, even to find our place. If you went by land, you had to find all of these little coloured ribbons that were tied to trees to get to the place, because otherwise people would come and rip off what you'd done. But what you've got to understand is that in the late 60s and early 70s, I was going up to these outback towns in Queensland, like Quilpie, right, and staying in the pub, and I'd go down to the bar, and I had long hair down to the middle of my back. I was wearing flared, bizarre pants that I bought from Carnaby Street, and I looked like I just climbed out of a spacecraft, to the locals, I was an alien. And all they wanted to do was fight you. So, you lived with that. You lived with the fact that these people wanted to kill you because you were too different.
Yeah.
And so
I mean, it really is Easy Rider. I mean, what you're talking about is the end of Easy Rider.
Totally relate to Easy Rider. I love that film. It was almost, symbolic of everything I was experiencing, really. That's why I felt drawn to other countries outside of Australia that had advanced their thinking more, that were, you go to New York, and even though it was really segregated with Harlem over here and New York there and blah, blah, they still all lived understanding each other's ethnicity and all that. And same in London. London was just a potpourri of Jamaicans
people.
And and I'd come back here and people were just closed-minded and
if you weren't from England, you an immigrant from England, way back, then you didn't belong here. They'd tell you to go home.
That's right.
They should have packed up and gone home themselves first, before no, seriously. It's like you're telling me to go home. You don't belong here either.
We had a prime minister who would state publicly that he felt nauseous
when he was
approaching the Australian shores because he was so obsessed with the monarchy.
Yeah.
And, look where we are today.
British. Yeah. Anyway.
Yeah.
All right, let's get back to the...
What I wanted to say, though, to listeners and viewers is that the Min light is an anomalous phenomenon similar to the Martha lights in Texas.
That's right.
Or what Paul Devereaux has termed the Earth lights over there in Europe.
Mm-hmm.
It is a contradictory phenomena. I've spent time out in the Nullarbor when I was doing To Catch a Flying Star for the ABC, and ruse shooters would have extraordinary experiences because you'd know, Gary, they're out there from dusk to dawn, and they would have paradoxical experiences. They would see it and then instantly, intuitively go, that's a poacher taking my quota of kangaroos.
Right.
And you've got to understand that the broader culture, the kangaroos are a massive problem in the outback. It's literally times and areas where there are plague proportions. So there has to be ruse shooters.
No, they're not a problem. We make them a problem.
I guess we do.
They belong
into a corner.
on the land.
That's what's been told to me by the ruse shooters.
The problem is the sheep and the cattle are a problem on this country. The hooven animals, not the marsupials that belong here. But anyway,
but let's go. So what would happen? Here's the paradox: they would stab it and steer it, and they wouldn't get any closer to the light. The next night they go out, that damn thing would dive bomb them.
Yeah,
and those lights can be as small as a golf ball, look like an orb, but consistently every eyewitness feels like there's some conscious interaction with the person, and then that orb can literally turn into a solid disc and craft.
Absolutely.
And we've had that during the bicentenary, there was a RAF running team coming down from Alice Springs that the whole relay race was brought to a close because they were bombarded by Min lights. So just to put that into context for people that might not be aware of that term. And I actually did I appeared in a documentary by Don Mears, who did Australian Skies. He did one on the Min light. You'll find it out there on YouTube, I'm sure. It's a fascinating study. But so let's walk up to the point when you became this maverick film director. How did that occur?
Or did the music come first?
The music was first.
Yeah. Well, the film was a musical, right? So it was just an extension of that. I mean, that was a natural evolution. Music, poetry, music. Then the music was. I became a professional. I'd left my dad's business, and I moved to London. And signed with Chapel Music as an in-house writer, composer, and producer, where I'd met John Vallins, right? And John Vallins became my lifetime co-writer, which he still is to today, right? So since 1976, we've been writing together. John went on and wrote Too Much, Too Little, Too Late, which was the massive worldwide #1 for Johnny Mathis and Denise Williams in 1978-79. So
extraordinary.
So there we were. I was in London, living in London, and we were recording and writing songs together, but always wanting to do our own material. So we formed a band called World and brought that back to Australia and toured that around here. But it was never going to succeed because it was a mixture of like Pink Floyd meets King Crimson, with
that would have been amazing.
Yeah. It had pretty serious sort of lyrics and the feel. Everything. We put together a concept show that had a laser shooting into a parachute and everything. It hadn't been done before. I took over the Star Theatre at Bondi Junction and and leased it, and
Wow.
we put the gig on there because it was a 12-piece band. Andrew Wilson on keyboards, and it was a pretty big deal.
Mhm.
Anyhow, but it wasn't going to succeed because John's record went to #1. This was 1979, and the record with Johnny Mathis went to #1. So John had to focus his attention on America and his career on America, which was understandable. And John had to leave the band, and he was the lead singer. So that was the end of the band. We dissipated. Some of the players were from the UK. Adrian White, the guitar player, went on to play with the Vibrators in the UK, and
Wow. With the Vibrators. My God.
yeah, and the Phil Ram band. So we'd met all of these cats when we were living in London. Anyhow, like it was Steve James was the guy we worked with as an engineer all the time in Chapel. He worked for Chapel Music. He was the in-house engineer, and he and John and I produced a lot of stuff together. And Steve's the son of Sid James, the actor.
You're kidding me.
And yeah,
God.
yeah. You should interview him sometime. I brought him to Australia and introduced him to his wife. And he produced Sons of Steel. Then he went on to produce the music for Young Einstein, and then he's gone on and he produced the Screaming Jets and loads of others, and hundreds and hundreds now. And then he's mixing our current album. So he's just fantastic, Steve.
Right.
But anyhow, so he helped us. With his vast experience, he helped us in a lot of ways, connecting us up with other musicians, terrific musicians to play. Because we were making session albums. We were bringing in great players and writing songs, and then having these guys. But what would happen was that when in the 70s, early 70s, while I was in America, 73, I met this guy with this John Phelps, the guy from the Avengers. His nickname is Flaps, and we lived with this guy. He gave us space in his house down on Manhattan Beach. This guy was a coke dealer, and we didn't know it. He used to run coke from Peru up to the Alaskan pipeline and sell it. And I helped invent a way that he could transport that by cutting the bottom out of shaving cream cans and putting a bladder in there, and then screwing the bottom back in, and then putting the coke inside it so that there was still shaving cream in it. So he used that to transport the stuff. It's quite common now, but
we're making that statement, people listening and watching, for educational purposes. Historically, we're not telling you to go about doing things like this. Yeah. Anyway, okay. And it's important up to the Alaskan pipeline. How are you going to get those people to do their job properly without a little incentive? Yeah.
But the point of this is that this guy, when I moved to London, he turned up in London with a big one of these containers and said, I'll leave it with you, and I'm going to New York. So that was a dangerous thing to do, to leave it with us. It was a kilo of uncut coke. Okay. So off he went, and I never ever saw him again. So we're sitting in this North Holt flat with a chapel contract and a big bag of toot. So we used to shake the bag up and put our heads in it, and the whole face would go numb and everything. It was fantastic. But I used to go into the guy that gave studio time at Chapel, because there was 3 major studios there. I mean, Frank Sinatra recorded in one of them, and that was just the best streets in studios in Bond Street, right? So I'd sign this guy's initials on his desk in coke, and he'd come in the morning and he'd have a blast and start his day. So he'd give me blocks of studio time, midnight to dawn, for free.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So, so we block out all the studio time, and we get all the best musicians that you could find to come into Chapel after midnight. We'd go to the Ship Hotel in Wardour Street and find them. They're all drunk, and bring them down to Chapel. And then we take them down to the basement. They had the best music store in the whole of London, and we get all the instruments that they would just dig into play, like the bass guitarist could get a brand new Fender, the drummer could take a great snare and that, and we come up in the elevator and they all had price tags hanging off all of these instruments, and we go in and we'd record, and they wouldn't want a session fee because they were just chuffed. They had all these precision basses and stuff, and we had all this toot, and it was just like killer. So we recorded all of these tracks. And so the boss of Chapel, who I won't mention him, but he his name, but he was the guy that discovered Jimi Hendrix for Polydor. Right. He signed him. Right. He was the head of Chapel, and he called us in after he first heard all of these songs that we'd been producing, Midnight to Dawn. And he said, he played them to us and said, yes, very well recorded. Then he said, come here, Gary. And John and I are sitting there, and come here, Gary. And he took me over to the window, and we were 6 stories up in the Chapel building in New Bond Street. Opens the window, and I'm going, yeah, and he grabs me by the hair and pushes me out the window, right? So I'm out the window, and he says, see those people down there? That's who you've got to relate to. That's who buy your music. And I'm looking down at all these people. There's a big long line there because Cliff Richard was arriving in a limousine to sign autographs, and I'm watching them all out there, and I'm thinking, well, I got to write music like Cliff Richard.
Oh, no.
Yeah, right.
Even though you're wired for sound, it sounds like.
Yeah.
So that was an experience that taught us that we had to write more commercial music to sustain ourselves as in-house writers and producers at Chapel Music. So we did that, and we wrote a whole album that was based on the fact that John had this hit, Too Much, Too Little, Too Late. That album was released last week in New York for the first time since 1978.
Wow.
Congratulations. How astounding. All these years later.
Right.
Yes.
What's it called?
Yeah.
What's the album
Keady
called?
Vallins. Keady Vallins album. And you know what happened? It happened through Facebook. Okay. A guy contacted me and said, I found this 45 of a song of yours that came out through Polydor, and he sent me a picture of it, and it was a picture of a 45 he bought off that we'd recorded in London that was released in France in 1978, right? And this guy worked for a digital download company, and he said, well, we're interested in doing a re-release. Have you got more songs like that? And I said, yeah, sure. And so we put the whole album together, and Line Productions in New York said, well, we're going to release it.
Wow.
It had John's personal version of Too Much, Too Little, Too Late on it. And this is lovely. We were in a studio, Midnight to Dawn. We just finished recording some rubbish, like we used to have to make ads and things, television commercials to sustain ourselves, right? And we finished all this stuff. And John was in the piano in the studio, and I was in the control room. And John was sitting at the piano tinkering, and he was a big tinkerer, and still is. And he's at a baby grand, and he's tinkering away, and it was mic'd up. And he started to play the introduction to Too Much, Too Little, Too Late, which was number one everywhere in the world. It was a really big record, And so I said to the engineer, I said, hit record. So he recorded it. So that John sang the song at the grand piano, and that went on. We put that on the album. So it's him doing his own version as the writer, the co-writer. He wrote it with Nat Kipner. You might remember Nat Kipner. Yes. Who discovered the Bee Gees. Yeah. Spin Records.
Such history.
Yeah. So it's all history. Tommy Emmanuel's on the album. All the best players in Sydney are on it because we did a bunch of sessions here in 1979. So that album's out, that's just bizarre. So it came out at the same time as Sons of Steel's been re-released over there, and that album's out, yeah. So,
So there's There's vinyl copies of Sons of Steel. There's DVD copies. There's CD copies. It's quite extraordinary that after all these years, it's all coming to fruition yet again. Maybe just tell us. Go on.
It found a new audience, Jamie. I remember we took it to we took it to Perth, right?
Yes,
That's
the
right.
Revelation Film Festival.
And, yes, and you introduced the film, and Duffo was there. Jeff Duff was there. And
you were sleeping with Jeff Duff.
Yes, and
yes.
And I cut a hole in the film, right, and put a backtrack up there, and a -1, and Jeff jumped up in the middle of the film with a microphone and sang a song, right?
He did Emergo in the William Castle tradition. It was incredible.
Yeah, it blew the audience's mind. Well, when we did all the radio interviews in Perth and everything, I all of a sudden realised that it was picking up a new audience. Right.
Right.
And then next minute, I was getting people like the what's it called, the Shockwave or something, a festival in Hungary, Shockproof, I think.
Okay. Yes.
And another one in all these Eastern European countries that hold these really sort of left of centre cult festivals were after Sons of Steel, and it was this was about 2016, 2017 when there was a lot of stuff starting to happen in Europe where they were starting to fear what was coming from Russia, right? Which led to the Ukrainian thing. I think it was Georgia that was causing a problem at that time. And so the people in Hungary and that was starting to get a bit nervous. And when they saw Sons of Steel, it felt relative to them because there's Alice riding a rocket out and it was all about anti-nuke, right? That was the concept.
Yeah,
so I picked up a new audience.
That's that one, isn't it?
Yes. And we should have asked the kiddies to remove the.
Well, no, it's a
rocket.
It's a bomb. Yeah,
you know what we should do at this stage? Go down. There's a beautiful HD restored trailer for it. Maybe we can play that trailer and come back. Yeah, but what we're going to do when we come back, we're going to get to this Percy Fawcett story because I'm sure our punters are going, where in the hell are we going with this? There is so much astounding history.
Yeah, you're not just one story. No. You haven't got just one facet to you.
Why you aren't a Netflix documentary series, I've got no idea. Know. This film has now been released to the world. It's on Umbrella in Australia.
Yeah.
Where is it in the US? Where can our US listeners and viewers find it, Gary?
It's Vinegar Syndrome.
Great label.
Yeah.
Really good. And, and the album, the vinyls with Enjoy the Ride Records.
Which should be, you should be able to find both literally through Amazon too, shouldn't you?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, but then they've got online sales sites anyhow, both Vinegar. But if you just, I think if you just Google Sons of Steel, you'll find it. There's so much flag on it.
And you're probably better off.
Website, you know.
We'll put in the liner notes a link, and you're probably better off to go to the sites themselves than to go to Amazon because it'll be much more expensive. Let's have a look at the trailer for this incredible cult film. What year was this?
1988.
88. Right. Yeah.
Right at the end of the 10B8. Let's go.
Yeah.
Black Alice, the man in question, is a peace activist.
The Pacific nuke-free zone is about to come undone.
Man is a rebel, and rebels must be destroyed.
Sick goose.
Get this thing out of my neck. I've got to get back.
Melted bodies.
I'm demolecularized. Their faces. Now
I bet you're the sort of bloke who picks his underpants out of his bum with his finger while he's talking to you. Come and sit on Alice's knee.
Slip on the appropriate underpants and socks.
You know what?
Yeah.
In many ways, that film laid the groundwork for when Matrix came and
Yeah.
was shot in Australia. There's a lot of imagery in that I actually look at and I see remnants of it
yeah.
in Matrix.
Yeah.
It's amazing how an independent, well, you know, not so much an independent production, but a maverick production like that can have an incredible influence in the industry, and that remains unknown to most
the
people.
greater audience.
Well,
Do you feel there were people looking at that film at the time and going, of course, Mini-Me is in there. Austin Powers. Where
Yeah,
did
that
that
was the
come
first-
from? The
yeah.
Jeff Duff character.
Yeah. Yeah.
It had the budget of the catering budget of Matrix.
Yeah.
Dead set.
Yeah.
We had
Yeah, I believe it.
$800,000. We started with $3 million. We raised $3 million through public offer, but I ended up having $800,000 to make the film, and we still did it. And with that film, we had Joe Pickering, one of the best the best cameraman in the country. We had Grace Walker, who'd done Crocodile Dundee, all the Mad Max films. You know, we had the crew of Doom, all who just loved the concept. And, you know, I talked to them all today. You know, Grace went on to do, he just finished the Walking Dead, right? He did all the Walking Dead series, production design for it. And, you know, we all laugh about the fact that the whole, the concept of the story is that, you know, a nuclear submarine is about to visit Sydney and a peace ferry collides with it. And triggers a third world war that wipes out the world, right? And it's just ironic that here we are with the AUKUS deal.
Yeah.
And nuclear submarines are going to be built 50 miles from Sydney in Wollongong.
Yeah.
Or housed there. Moored
there. And that harbour has had nuclear subs intermittently in it. And you know, when you actually get in touch with our Atomic Energy Commission here, which I have done extensively, our survival strategy is from the 50s. It's literally duck and cover. So I mean, those things sitting in your harbour of one of your largest populated cities, well, you know, if something happened down there, we were in Annandale, we're about 20 minutes away, we'd be in a firestorm and it'd be all over for us.
It's like butter us, we're toast.
Do you find, we were talking about this yesterday, just privately and intimately, that it's odd. It seems like life is repeating itself. All these concepts and ideas have come full circle, and that film today feels even more relevant than what it must have in its day.
Hence, what's old is new again.
Yeah. Well, you know, the thing about when I made that film, you'll see where the roller skate section is in through the tunnel under the domain there, the moving footway. You'll see Mururoa up on the wall. It's a lot because the French were exploding nuclear bombs in the Mururoa atoll at the time.
Yes.
So when I made this film, my object was to take it to France and play it at universities all over France to build up support to stop the French. And we did. And the University of New South Wales in 1990 acknowledged that by giving me an honorary doctorate there for visual literacy for having done that, which was
incredible, Gary.
Tough by that. Yeah, but you know, at least it did something. It actually achieved something in something more than just a film achieves. It actually helped stop the French. But you know, we were having fallout from seagull crap dropping radiated poo onto fields that cows ate the grass and irradiated the milk in Victoria at the time. 1988.
Yeah.
You know what? It's an extraordinary thing for an artist to think their film can have an impact and effect. But it's even more profound when that can go on and have a really important effect in people's lives. I've always thought that the relevance of art is only worthy in its merit of touching that audience and changing their lives. And, you know, oddly enough, a cult like that, out of the blue, because of your intent and who you are, goes out there and has this massive overpowering effect. And more people need to be made aware of this. But what we're going to take you is on the down south anomalies route here, Gary, because there was a story you told me years. Okay, I hear the seriousness there, but there was a story you told me years ago that mesmerized me and Aspasia.
Absolutely,
and it's just astounding. And I'd love to have a little bit of that moment you had with Kim Fowley, but tell us about this moment where it looks like the spirit or the energy or the force or the morphogenic resonance of this incredible pioneering explorer and who was working for the railways, Percy Fawcett, came into your life. And thank you so much. I believe it's the first time you've ever articulated this story to the public.
Absolutely. I've got to an age now where I don't care that people might think I'm nuts.
Yeah.
Well, when you're mixing with us, you definitely are.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, it was a revelation to realize that I'm the crazy man up the street now, the one that I always thought was crazy. Now I've become that person. So, yes, we enter the twilight zone. But that is beautiful of you to have that insight and that self-awareness that you are now the crazy man. So, sorry. Let's go,
1973.
Okay, so 1973, I'm with my mate, John Tobin, who's a painter and artist. And we were chilling out in his apartment on the ground floor of an apartment block in Bondi. All right. So he's got open glass windows on this ground floor. And there's a Hills hoist, which the American viewers wouldn't know what that is, but it's a clothesline, a metal clothesline out there. And we're looking at the yard. We're sitting there chilling. He's sort of painting away. We've got the record player on. It's playing Dark Side of the Moon. I think it was Us and Them at the time. And we're smoking bongs of Queensland banana heads, which you would know are potent.
I've got no idea about that at all. I've never been there in my entire life. No idea. It's just the folly of youth. Yeah.
These were buds about that long, and they were killer buds. You could see them a mile away. Anyhow, we're smoking away. We're off our faces, and there's a storm rolling in. So every now and then we hear a rumble of thunder. The record's going. John's painting. I'm stone blimming on Pink Floyd, and all of a sudden, lightning strikes the clothesline in the yard, the metal clothesline, right? Which is like an antenna.
It's like a lightning rod.
Yeah.
It is. It's a lightning rod. And it just went whoomp. And this force field came straight in through the open glass windows of the basement, the ground floor flat. The record player went, when Pink Floyd cut out. Our hair was all standing on end. Bits of paper flew around the room. It was just an experience. I can't even articulate how mad it was. It was like a whirlwind. And we knew we'd been affected by this thing. I picked up a piece of paper. John used to draw on butcher's paper. And I picked up a pen, and I'm left-handed, and I wrote with my right hand all this stuff. I couldn't stop writing. And it was when I ended up sometime later looking at what I'd written a thesis on electromagnetic energy. I'm no scientist. I don't know where it came from.
Right.
So it was just automatic writing. Wow.
Automatic writing. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, call me nuts.
Was it in
but
your
did happen.
handwriting? No, it wouldn't have been in your handwriting because you
No,
were.
it was
Yeah.
the wrong hand.
Yeah, right. Okay.
It was, and John was painting away like crazy, like we were totally detached, though we knew we'd experienced something, but something had triggered this intense creativity in our minds, in our own field. So John was busy painting this bizarre painting, and I was madly writing all this stuff down. Anyhow, eventually I get into the car and I drive home, and we thought, well, that was a wild experience. That night I get into the shower. No, sorry, the following morning I get into the shower, right, to have a shower. And as soon as I turn on the shower, a voice speaks to me. And I go, woo, turn off the shower, turn on the shower. The voice speaks to me again. And it's talking about some place in South America. And I'm like, oh, this is bizarre, right? So I'm constantly tuning into this person, but only when I have a shower, right? It's not like there's a voice in my head. It's not like I'm nuts and schizophrenic or something. It's only when I turn on the shower.
Right.
What happens over the next couple of weeks is that what this voice was telling me was about El Dorado, a lost city called El Dorado by the Spanish. I'd never heard of it before, right?
Yeah.
Next minute, it's on the White Album, right? The Beatles' White Album, El Dorado.
Right.
Out comes Jeff Lynne with ELO, the album El Dorado.
Right.
It's everywhere. I go to buy a packet of cigarettes because I was a smoker then in a newsagent in Double Bay. And I walk over and I pull a book out and I say, I'll have the cigarettes and the book. I didn't even look at the book. I took it home. It was about El Dorado.
Right.
Everywhere I went. So next I'm going, this is bizarre. I need to find out who this dude is, right? Who's talking to me. So I'm in the shower.
So was he talking to you every time you went into the shower over a 2-week period?
Every time I had a shower, I was walking around filthy because I was afraid to have a shower. I'm thinking, what's going on? But there is a theory behind that the magnetism that's created by the ionization of the water, the same way that this makes me jump to a bit of another story, but I'll do it just for the sake of it. But when I was living in England, like I was talking about, we used to go to Aylesbury with this guy Mike Vittori, who was the A&R guy at Chapel, a lovely guy. He was a witch. He was a warlock. Right. And I used to go and stay with him in Aylesbury, and we'd go just to go into churches on Sunday, and he'd stand up in the church and he'd attack the priest about everything the priest talked about. Right? He'd not in a rude way. He debated it. Yeah, right. From an occult perspective. Sure. Right? Today we accept it. Then no. So I used to have fun going with him and listening to this, but we'd go out and look for ley lines. Right. This is 1970, 73, 73. We're looking for ley lines, right? Right. And we find them, and there are the ley lines everywhere. Straight lines with standing stones, and you can see them as plain as day. John Michel then writes books about them. John Michel's books, right? I meet him and talk to him about that, and we're all on the same page. We knew that these were created because underneath those stones is running water. The stones are much as deep as they are high, same as Stonehenge, right? Yes. And a bit like on Easter Island, there's the whole body of those. Yeah. Yeah. So they're purposely put down so that the running water ionizes the stone, so that if you hug one of those stones, you get re-energized to continue your pilgrimage to the sacred sites. So the ley lines were the direct line to a sacred site, with the stones along the way to revitalize you. So
Right.
when I'm in the shower, that's kind of like what's happening, but it's
Right.
also allowing me to tune into something. So I figured there's some sort of message being given by somebody that certain people are receiving, and I was lucky enough to be one of them. And so was
Right.
Jeff Lynne from ELO, and so was John Lennon when he wrote the El Dorado track on the White Album, blah, blah.
Mhm.
Okay. So all these people, another guy called Andrew Thomas, an Australian who wrote fantastic books. He was the guy that went into the British Museum and found the clay pot that he asked to have the case open, took the clay pot out, squeezed a lemon into it, and said,
yes.
"This is a battery. This is a battery."
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
right, he discovered it was a clay pot from Egypt,
Yes.
4,000 years old, right?
Mhm.
I don't know where this guy disappeared to, but he's an Australian, right? And
Yeah.
he was,
Wow.
yeah, and it's
The
he wrote
Baghdad
books-
battery. We will
Yeah,
have
the
to track
Baghdad
him
battery.
down.
Yeah.
Baghdad battery.
God, that's
But this
super
guy
cool.
was writing books at the same time as Daniken. Andrew
Right.
Thomas, his name is, worth exploring, because a lot of the stuff that these guys found back then is really relevant today, but it was out there then, right? And so,
Mhm.
got hidden away. Anyhow, so I finally make contact to discern this guy's name, and it's Percy Fawcett. Okay, he tells me his name. It's not like I can have an each-way telephone call conversation with him.
Mhm.
It's kind of like I can think stuff, and I do get a sort of response. So he's giving me where he disappeared, where El Dorado is. He's telling me this in a sort of intermittent way,
Back on
and I
a
find
minute.
out that's
Okay,
who
hang
he
We're
is.
back on. There you are.
Hang on, Gary. We
We
just
just had a little moment where everything went off the Wi-Fi. So if you could just step back to that sentence
That's
before.
Percy.
sorry. Yeah. Yeah.
We
That's
got to Percy and
Fawcett.
he's broke through into the podcast.
Yeah,
Yeah, maybe.
so I get his name, right?
Mhm.
As I say, I can't have it. It's not like a telephone conversation. It's intermittent somehow.
Yeah.
So is the voice in your head?
No, it's in the shower.
No, but
It's
are
in
you
the-
hearing
it's in the head.
inside your head?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you can think of something. You can
Yes.
think of a question, and then
Mhm.
he will answer you.
Sort of.
Yeah.
The
Okay.
Sort of
answer's
different.
there somewhere. It's a bit cryptic. It
Yeah.
was cryptic, but
Mhm.
I the answer, the way that I resolved the cryptic answer was
Mhm.
by accidentally coming across things that triggered the
Right.
actual answer. So
Mhm.
Was that accidental or was that part of
Well,
the process?
Yeah.
couldn't be.
Because what you're talking about there is literally what Sheldrake, what Jung were talking about. It's the mind,
Synchronicity.
the mind at large,
Yeah.
synchronicity as
Yeah.
well, but the mind at
Uh-huh.
large, the morphogenic resonance. And then
Tapping into
I
it.
mean, if you look at what gets submitted to the patent office,
Mm.
I think, and did a statistical study, you would find that people without cross collaborating
Not knowing each other are
are submitting patents for the
same
same thing
patents at the
around the
same
same
time.
time.
Yeah.
So I take
Right.
it it's something similar to that.
yeah.
Yes, it was universal. No doubt in the
Mhm.
world. When I met Maxine Asher years later, the woman that found the Bimini rocks and found Atlantis off the coast of Spain and has now passed away, unfortunately, but she had a mother kidnapped by the CIA and everything to shut her up.
Wow.
I worked with her at the Ancient Mediterranean Research Association in Los Angeles in 1976. And she told me that this experience was, I was channeling somebody, and it was a universal challenge at channeling because it ended up stopping. It stopped at a given point, right?
Right.
Anyhow, I then went to the Australian Library, the Mitchell Library, to research the name Percy Fawcett because I knew nothing about him. That book that I'd bought at Bondi Junction also had a section on Percy Fawcett, which was bizarre.
Of course,
I didn't
yeah.
see it at first, but when I went back and read it the second time, bang, there it was.
Well,
So
Elder, Percy Fawcett is, when you said the name Percy Fawcett, I was straight away went El Dorado. You know what I mean? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, yeah, he
I
disappeared.
read it in
1935.
the Encyclopedia Britannica. That was my
But he was before Hapgood. He was a total pioneer.
yeah.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay, so
He's
what was the message from Percy? What was Percy telling you?
He was telling me that he had found remnants of Atlantis.
Right.
He had found the people he was looking for living in sort of a labyrinth underneath the Mato Grosso jungle, a whole society, right?
Okay.
And that he wasn't going to come back from that with his son. He wasn't dead.
So,
And he was lost. He was lost.
yeah. So
wasn't he?
Percy was. Do you want to tell people who Percy Fawcett, when he was, and what his story?
He was a colonel in the British Army.
Mm-hmm.
In the early 1900s, early part of the 20th century, he was sent to Sri Lanka to survey a railroad for the British Army.
Mm-hmm.
So he'd be there with a group of people and theodolites, and they'd find the most direct route for a train line. As he was going through the jungles in Sri Lanka and then later in India, he found that these lines, when they drew them on a map, had already ancient sites underneath them. Right. So he found ancient roads directly on these lines that he'd created with a theodolite, which was the most direct line for a train line to go. He found that the ancients already had that knowledge. And it just blew his mind. It really did blow his mind. The more he uncovered, the more he realized that there had been a previous civilization on this planet that was equal to our own in a different way.
Mm-hmm.
And it led him to looking for Atlantis, remnants of Atlantis in South America. Now, if you take the given map of Atlantis that you see all the time with Poseidon and with a cross on it, marked on it, you see it all the time. You know the map?
Yes.
Right?
Yep.
Okay. If you turn
that
map
the Perry
upside,
Reese map?
no,
is that the Perry Reese?
No, it's not Perry
No,
Reese.
sorry. We had you drop out then, so we're missing a little bit of information. Start again, maybe. I'm sorry.
That's all right. It's the only known map. Nobody knows where it came from of Atlantis, right? And it shows where the capital of Atlantis was. Now, if you take that map and you turn it upside down, it's South America.
Wow.
Right.
And where the cross is exactly where El Dorado is.
Okay.
So I got these coordinates from Percy Fawcett. So I knew where Atlantis was. El Dorado is the entrance to what remains of the survivors of Atlantis.
Right.
You know, when Atlantis went down, some people must have survived when it was involved in the Great Flood. Others got away and ended up on the west coast of Ireland, where you can see where they went. And as they travelled across England, they had nothing left. They left evidence of themselves across as they went towards Europe. And you can see that. And the people that believe in Atlantis as having been not just a figment of Plato's imagination, they know that these people, there were survivors, and that the people of Atlantis, it was an advanced civilization that did interact with Egypt and Aztec, Mayan, Olmec, even, right? And that there's still remnants of it in existence, but it's all confused up and destroyed. A lot of it destroyed by what the Spanish did in South America. I mean, you know, that
Sure.
it's criminal what they did. I mean, I cried
It's
when I first
horrible.
went there.
It's horrible. Yeah, it's horrible.
Frightening. It was genocide to the max.
Yeah.
You know, religion, don't get me on religion, but I mean, at the
No,
end of the
I
day,
know. Yeah.
yeah. So anyhow,
So most normal people going through this, Gary, they would go, okay, am I suffering a schizophrenic moment? Is something going wrong here? No, there seems to be something in this research.
Yeah.
But knowing the maverick that you are, you took it one step further. You mounted
I'm going to
an
go
expedition,
there.
you know, which is just wild.
yeah, well, that was Marcel Homé. You ever heard of him? Marcel
No.
Homé.
Vaguely that name rings a bell. Tell me.
Okay, he voyaged. He explored so much through South America, through the Amazon jungle, and he found some amazing things. He found the egg of life, a giant rock that was hollowed out in the shape of an egg, and that if you sat inside it, there was gases that came up through and allowed you to see the past.
Oh.
I mean, you read his books. He was a French guy, a French explorer who was just incredible. I tried to meet him, but I couldn't make it. We couldn't put it together. Anyhow, he introduced me to a guy called Daniel Russo, who was in Chile, who had accompanied him into the jungles of the Mato Grosso, and he could be our guide to get us to where we wanted to go. I got a film crew together. I decided we're going to do this. John and I, the guy that was the painter, we're going to go there and we're going to go and find Percy Fawcett because he's calling us, right?
Yeah.
And I by then I'd researched the pants. I did 2 years. So this started in 1973. This is 1975 by then. So I've had those 2 years to research the duds off this.
Yeah.
You know, I really had. I'd got right into it. I'd researched everything I could find on Atlantis. I'd read everything I could from von Däniken and all the rest of it. And I'd formulated, I'd read Donnelly's Antediluvian World. You know, it was like I was right up to speed on it all, and it all clicked and made sense to me. Everything made sense. That Fawcett was right. Fawcett had told me that he wasn't lost. He found what he was looking for. So before I leave, John actually spoke to a guy that was a newspaper reporter that he'd met, and the guy said he wanted to cover the story of us leaving for this expedition, and I said no, because you're going to make us out as rat bags, right? Nuts.
Yeah.
And we talked with, and he kept badgering us, right? He worked for the Sunday Herald at the time.
Oh God. Yeah.
Sun Herald. Anyhow, he kept badgering us, and I had all sorts of things going on at the time. I had the Mormons ringing me up because they'd heard about it. I don't know how. You know, they've got this thing about Jesus disappearing into the South America and all that sort of stuff. So, yeah. Anyhow, this guy decides he wants to write the story. So he helps me put together a film crew that's going to meet us in Santiago, Chile, to go into the Mato Grosso looking for El Dorado. So he helps us with it. So in exchange, I allow him to do the story. So he does the story. And he makes us out to be loony bins, right? Really chasing little green men and all sorts of stuff. I open right up to him and tell him the truth about how there's been lots of occasions in labyrinth type tunnels in Peru and in the Andes where people have seen shadows of people living underground and green light coming out of these incredible tunnel systems.
The stories are endless. The stories are endless.
Absolutely. And it just all made sense to me, but to this guy, it was just perfect fodder for him to make us out as a pair of nuts.
Yeah.
Anyhow, I'd applied to the Brazilian government through Canberra to be able to have an expedition out of Brazil into the jungle. You had to have permission, right?
Sure.
They gave me the permission, so I had that in writing. So we gather up and off we go. We go to South America we go to Los Angeles and then we fly down to Brazil. And the article that had come out in the paper precedes us, and we get the permission revoked in Brazil.
Wow.
Which was a terrible shock, because there we were, everything organized, and it was revoked. So we have to go to Santiago to meet up with Daniel Russo and hopefully join up with the film crew and go in from there, because you can, right?
Right.
But when we get off the plane in Santiago, we get off in the middle of a revolution that just seemed to happen upon our arrival. A guy had committed suicide jumping off a building, and he landed on a French-Canadian tourist walking up the street and killed him, and it triggered a whole massive event.
Major international incident.
There was gunships going down the streets, and everybody was rounded up, and it was frightening. We're in a hotel, and we're looking out the window, and there are kids running across in front of gunships with machine gun guys that had fire, and the kids were having great fun running across in front of these like tank type things.
Wow.
It was just frightening. I came down quickly with dysentery, and I just sat on a toilet for 2 days, and finally this big fat beautiful lady came into me of Peruvian or local Indian descent, and with a glass with a coca leaf in it, and said, "Drink this and you'll be all right." I drank it and I was all right. That was magic.
Back to square one again.
Yeah.
Yes. So then we go to meet up with Daniel Russo and in the street we're grabbed by the army and we're put into a holding prison where we spend three days wondering whether we're going to be executed
Or what?
Or what? We don't know what's going on. I mean, we're in the middle of the Pinochet revolution, for Christ's sake.
Wow. Extreme madness.
Yeah. I mean, when we were arrested, the guy had. I remember looking down the barrel of a AK-47 aimed at me.
You'd never forget that.
The guy with his finger on the trigger was probably about 14. They were all enlisted, militants from the hills that had come in and, fighting. There's a revolution every 2 minutes in those days.
Especially at that time. I mean, Netflix has just put out the documentary on Colony Dignidad, and we actually interviewed Peter Lavinda, who drove in there in the late 70s and wish he'd never done that. Because when he came back to America, and that was a Nazi enclave, they were doing everything from sarin gas development to munitions to electronic intercepts, doing similar to what Epstein was caught doing, blackmailing people.
Absolutely.
When he gets back to the US, who's waiting for him at the airport?
FBI.
The FBI. It's all in tandem, all working together. So that was a red hot time, and you're in a red hot area.
Yeah.
Well, we'd been into since we'd arrived, even though all this shit was going on, we'd had a couple of drinks in bars, and a couple of times we'd met Americans that we knew had to be CIA agents.
Yeah, right.
Just by their attitude, and God, I'd been. By then, I was pretty experienced at hanging in hotel bars around the world, because it was where you met people. And my brother and I used to call it the jazz film, because you just never know who you're meeting, who's staying in a hotel. I met Kemlani in a hotel in Hong Kong, and he was on his way to Australia to do the loan deal that got Whitlam axed. I was having a drink with him before he went to Australia. He'd been invited by the government.
Thank God you didn't get him to fund Sons of Steel. Yes. But anyway, God.
But so I figured that the association of meeting these spurious Americans in Santiago got us in jail.
Yeah, right.
Because they suspected us as being that. Every white bloke that was in town, and I use that term loosely because we're not in a black society, but I'm saying that, every Caucasian Westerner who looked like a Westerner was being rounded up because they thought they were all spies, right?
Yeah, right.
So we're shoved in this thing.
The majority would be. And I mean, you could imagine trying to explain to them your story. But look, I went into this shower after this lightning strike. And they'd be going, right, mate. Yeah.
No, they had our passport. They didn't even want to talk to us. They just said, we, as far as we were concerned, we were spies. That's it, right?
Yeah, right.
So we tried everything. We tried, we're not given much to eat. It was horrible. It was scary. You heard gunshots all the time, so you thought they were executing people. Didn't know. And finally, a guy from the Australian Embassy comes along, and he says, "I can get you out." Right, and we go, "Yay!" So that was a thrill. And to get us out, he put us in the embassy cricket team that was playing against the British embassy cricket team.
Right.
This is the way you're going to survive.
Yeah.
It worked.
Yeah.
It worked because
That's
after the game of cricket, which we lost, I was taken to the airport, and John went one way on one flight, and I ran for the flight on the other because you couldn't book a seat. You had to run for the seats on the plane on land Chile. Oops. And off I went to Lima, and then to Tahiti, where I just had to chill. I just had to chill in Tahiti on my way back to Sydney. So I went and stayed on Mururoa. Not Mururoa, Jesus. What was the name of the place?
That's not. I mean, maybe what? When was Mutiny on the Bounty Shot? Right, okay. That's when Roger Ward would have been there writing the set a bit earlier than that. You could have bumped into Roger Ward
in a bar somewhere.
How astounding!
Yeah.
And to this day, do you think there is still this expedition is unfinished? Do you think you could be should we be in touch with Graham Hancock? Could you still be sitting on the right coordinates for what is possibly El Dorado?
Well, through the year that Jeff Duff put out his memoirs,
Right.
I did the basement with him as a guest. Were you there? You were there, weren't you?
Yeah, Jamie
I
introduced.
introduced tonight. So this is
we were there.
I introduced you to John Tobin, who was there with me, and John Tobin was the guy that was his
The
apartment.
artist.
That
It was the artist. Yeah.
Right?
Oh my God!
I didn't tell
My
you
God.
at the time because I didn't know that John and I were betrothed to keep this a secret.
Right.
Okay? So I didn't want
Cat's
to get
out of the
involved
bag
with it.
now. Yep.
Well, anyhow, John, that's the first time I'd seen John since 1985.
Right.
Incredible.
So I found him, and after I'd come back from the Philippines and everything, and he came and I invited him to Jeff's launch. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So we then talk a little bit, and I find out that, he's got a daughter. He's a school teacher. He's got a daughter that lives down in Merimbula, and he was going to come and visit me. But he said, first I'm going on a holiday. So he went on a holiday to Titicaca, Lake Titicaca, because he was still following up on everything to do with Fawcett, Atlantis, and the whole conspiracy
Still
deal,
there.
all of it.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't come back.
Oh.
I've been in touch with DFAT and everyone, and he just disappeared.
He's lost?
He's
Wow.
gone.
He's found it. He's with
He went
Percy.
the
He's
same
with
way
Percy.
as Percy.
He's with Percy.
I don't have much of an insurance plan or medical health cover. When are you willing? Let's crowdfund this thing. Let's all go there together. That's the way for eternal life. That is an incredible story.
Well, you can do it now. You can go in by chopper. We couldn't do it before because there was too much activity between the Brazilian government and the Venezuelan government on the border of the mountain range that this 0.0 is in, right?
Right.
So there
right.
was all this. There's all these warring factions in there. So you couldn't take a chopper and go, but now you could.
Yeah,
now you
right.
could.
Are you aware? You may be aware of the recent stories last year, especially starting around mid-year down in Peru.
Oh, yeah.
About these the Pelicaris, which is this face-peeling alien. And initially the government was saying we're looking at claim jumping
Gold diggers. Yeah,
gold diggers on flying platforms, which is
Yeah.
incredible. But it does look like researchers have gone down there. Mr. Alberino has done the best research of the lot, and it looks like there's genuinely something occurring. And at the same time, I believe there are elements of Space Force down there doing maneuvers with the local government. So there has always been extraordinary activity in that era.
Absolutely.
And in the late 70s, there was remarkable activity in which I believe, if you look at the research, and especially Leslie Keane and many other researchers, it looks like the government had full-blown contact. And they're actually bringing fishing villages to a shutdown late at night in that area because of the intensity of it. And a similar thing has been happening and is still happening at this point in time.
Yeah.
So it's quite a remarkable area. What do you do at the end of the day with this information in this story, Gary? Especially if you've had to hold it inside for many years.
Well, it just seems that on a regular basis, more things pop up that give it validity, I suppose.
Yeah, right.
You look at the amount of alien or UFO, UAP activity in Chile, where there's where we were, where Daniel Russo was. He's dead now, but most of the people that were looking into Fawcett were there because it was safer.
Right.
And the Brazilians weren't as happy about all of the efforts to go into the jungle to find remnants of a civilization, because they were looking to plunder the jungle.
Yeah.
If something's found that the UN decides is a heritage site, it changes the potential of being able to strip it for McDonald's or something, right?
Or strip it for locals. I mean, the amount of, still artifacts that are being sold on the black market down there, elongated skulls and all that stuff is extraordinary. And I mean, 9 times out of 10, it's just the locals trying to eke out a living against the corporations that are running down there and trying to even seize their friggin' water supplies.
So can we...
Go on.
I was just going to say, can we blame that journalist on your expedition not succeeding?
No, I think it wasn't meant to succeed.
Really?
I met Jeff
because
Lynn.
if he hadn't have written that story, you would have been able to go to Brazil and go through there too.
Oh, precisely. But all these other people that were...
So what was his name? There's a special place in hell for him. Tell me his name.
You know what, Gary?
Tell me his name.
He's dead.
Gary has got such a gracious heart.
I know
He's not going to go and assault anyone.
I know.
No, but
you will.
I met some of the people over the years. I've met people who had a similar experience. I was lucky. I was with Russell Morris in Los Angeles, and we went and met a friend of his who was Jeff Lynn from ELO, and I managed to ask him why he wrote the El Dorado album and why he so clearly in that album described El Dorado. Where did that come from? And he said, in a dream. He was getting messages in a dream. I was getting messages in the shower.
In the shower, yeah.
So he was getting them in a dream.
And was he getting him at the same time that you were?
Yes.
Round about this? Okay. Yeah,
yes.
right.
There was a universal energy out there at the time, and I don't yet understand. I contacted his brother, Colonel Fawcett's brother. I was trying to get to his wife, but she didn't want to talk. But she did say to the brother to let me know that he achieved what he set out to achieve. That's what she said.
Okay.
They were the words.
Wow.
And his brothers, who wouldn't answer the phone at the time, it took me a lot of calls to get him, but I finally did get him. He said the same thing. He said he was in spiritual contact with his wife well after he disappeared, right up until 1954, when his wife got sick. So that's 1925 to 1954. He was in spiritual contact with his wife.
Right. That's nearly 25 years. No.
Right.
You know,
So,
this is one of the most
29
profound,
years, yeah.
unsung, untold stories.
Yeah, for sure.
And you are a prolific writer of fiction. You need to write this story. This story needs to be documented because, you know what? I've been researching for a while now the anomalous nature of music, of which there are so little books on. I mean, how do musicians fall into step so perfectly? What is that thing? And as a musician, even as a DJ, I've had nights where something else takes over, and you speed perfect, you track perfect, you note perfect, and at the end of it, you go, well, that was like those moments I have driving the car and I forget. But
I don't remember
obviously
doing
the muscle memory took over, but something else in music
took over.
is so profound. And I think there's this thing there about musicians. Even Travis Walton privately spoke to us that he would get phone calls from very well-known musicians about abduction experiences, missing time.
Yeah.
They never wanted it told publicly.
Of course.
That's right.
You know?
That's the other show we got to
Very
do.
true.
Let's just run through very
your
quickly
books,
these
not
covers.
Not only music, film, and books. So you're just doing all of them.
And this guy
aren't you?
during the pandemic, and I mean, these
Al
are extension
and
of
the
Sons of Steel, and tell us if we're wrong there. And are these the covers by your son?
Yes, my son Brandon.
Brandon, you are an
42
extraordinary, brilliant, beautiful artist, and I thank him very much.
So
yeah,
are these graphic
doing
novels or what are they?
No, they're written word books.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've written 8 books in the Sons of Steel series.
Right.
But they're not like the movie. These deal with things like the Tablets of Destiny.
Wow.
They deal with a lot of what you would call conspiracy theories, and it's Black Alice solving them.
Okay, and now let's get that terminology right. Investigative journalism. You know, we're going to throw away that word conspiracy because it's been tainted by the word theory, and that originally came from the CIA memo to dissenters of the Warren Commission. They said easier way to trivialize this stuff is to put the word theory on the end of that. So we're going to throw that away. How about the girl with the lunatic fridge? This guy's got a way with words when it comes to title, and you'll see it in these next 3 books. Suicide Blonde, killed by
died by her own hand.
But this one's a bit provocative.
Smuggling. Ooh,
with the imagery.
That's a series. That's another series. That's the Axis Stone series. He's an Australian hard-boiled film noir sort of detective, like straight out of the 50s.
That's the other thing. Carter Brown.
Well, it's too much.
Like
I mean, I'm sitting here thinking we're leading into Carter Brown, and that Carter Brown story is so profound. And we've had this little clipping with the sound today. I want to rectify that. What do you reckon, Gary, if we did part 2 in about a month's time with you? Would you be up for that? Because we are. Yeah. And I just want to go over this stuff again.
There's too much stuff.
It's the most exciting story. But before we end tonight, and I'm sorry to we're sort of doing cut up on the spot here.
Well,
I want that quick story about when you met Kim Fowley, the man behind Cherry Bomb.
Okay.
Or should we leave that for another?
Let's leave
that for another time.
It's because it's
it's too much gold in one interview.
We need to digest what we've got so far before we put any more on the plate, I reckon.
You know, I've always felt about Gary Aspar this great fondness, and you
because we didn't even go into Bunyips.
No, we're going to get a little bit of Bunyip. But you fell in love with Gary before I did.
Yeah, absolutely.
You were running around the house going, this is the greatest film I've ever seen.
Absolutely.
And anyhow,
You guys are
but
great.
My double,
You guys are wonderful.
my amazing perfect double bill, Australian double bill is Sons of Steel and Pandemonium.
yeah.
Do you know
Right.
what I mean? Those
Yep.
two films, they're just,
Yep.
they're it. They're totally.
And Hayden Keaton,
Yeah, Hayden. Yeah,
Alex Perez,
Yep.
and you, Gary, are the only three directors. Oh no, we've got the Cameron brothers that have done Late Night with the Devil. That's 4 now.
Yeah,
But I feel like we've actually hit the cream of the crop.
yeah, we have.
Hollywood burned down, baby. We've
Well-
already got the best people in the art when it's involved.
We have. But yeah, let's if we're going to do the Bunyip thing, we need to.
Yeah, and maybe tell us. You told me in writing these books, you now actually done some research into the history of the Bunyip, which is like probably one of our greatest cryptozoological characters, but one that I would find very difficult to find solid evidence for. And the stories sort of stop at the turn of the 20th century, but maybe I'm wrong. Maybe you know more about
What
that
have you
than we
found?
do. Yes.
Well, I started writing another series, which is called The Next Files.
Oh, I love that.
Right, okay, instead of the
But
X-Files.
it's aimed at a young audience, 16, 17, 18. And it's about an Indigenous young girl named Jax and a Chinese, Filipino, Australian boy who both left school, got a job with a television production company in Sydney, you know, in a pretty average capacity. The girl's father was a famous archaeologist who disappeared in the jungles of Mindanao in 2017. So she was raised understanding archaeology, and she goes to the boss of the production company and says, I'm better than being an assistant. I want to be a reporter. And he says, here, follow me, takes her to a room, opens the door. It's full of boxes. He said, since the X-Files, everybody in the Asia Pacific region has sent us their experiences with strange phenomena, and we've kept a lot. It's all yours. Explore.
Wow.
So these two
Fascinating.
kids go on investigations of these phenomena. The first one I did was the Min Min. So I've done that book. It's out.
Yeah.
So the next one I did was Langusa, which is about a witch in Indonesia, in Sabah, Sarawak, who lands on the thatched roof of houses and lowers her tongue into the navel of pregnant young girls. And
that's the us one. That's the us one.
And the us one is actually
Philippine.
That's
Filipino. Yeah, that's Philippines. But same.
Indonesia.
Yeah.
So
and there is great exploitation films on that
there are.
stuff
There's
too that are
them.
frightening.
Yeah.
Then I did then they go searching for her father in the jungles of Mindanao because her father believed. Now, you remember I lived for 20 years in the Philippines. So one of the things I discovered while I was there in my mad research was that during in 1530, after the Spanish conquistadors Cortez had destroyed the Aztec Empire, by 1530, after Magellan had found the Philippines, ships were sent from Acapulco in Mexico to the Philippines.
Right. Did the Philippines know that they were lost?
Huh?
Did the Filipino people know that they were lost? Because you said they found that Magellan found the Philippines.
Oh,
it's
right. No, discovered. The
yeah. Well, did they know that they were undiscovered?
So when these ships, would go from Acapulco, the first 3 ships that returned to the Philippines after Magellan, because remember Magellan got killed there, right?
Yeah.
So nobody was going to go back.
No.
So the first 3 ships leave Acapulco and go to the Philippines. They go all that way without finding land, which is bizarre, but they do, right? The first place they land is Guam. When they land in Guam, it's really hostile. So they go, whoa. By then, they're out of water and they're out of food. They head towards the next island, which was just north of Mindanao. They land there and they get food and water, right? And that's where they had the first Mass, which is celebrated in the Philippines because that's the advent of Catholicism in the Philippines. However, on board that ship are slaves. The slaves are Aztecs. Because they're right. The Aztecs are sent when they reach the mainland of Mindanao. They're sent into the jungle first in case there's hostiles there.
Right.
But they don't come back.
Okay.
And that's a fact. They didn't come back.
Yeah.
So they started an Aztec empire deep in the jungles of Mindanao that exists to today.
Oh, okay. Wow.
And that's what Jackson Doc, and that's what her father had found when he did a Percy Fawcett. He went into to Mindanao looking to prove this as a fact and found Aztec society. So they go in and they find it as well. So that was the second book in the series. The third book in the series is Bunyip, which I'm halfway through now, and I've been researching and found that the Bunyip, though there's been experiences of a physical creature, the Bunyip exists in the minds of Aboriginal people. Particularly the people in the region of there it is, the Wiradjuri people.
Oh, the Wiradjuri people, yes.
The Wiradjuri people of the area around the Union, where the Darling meets the Murray River. Right. Now, what I discovered is that that during a massive floods, crocodiles came down the Darling into the Murray and could have got from the Murray into the Murrumbidgee. And so you could have got crocodiles as far down as Leeton and Narandra and Wagga and in that area, that basin there, because the Wiradjuri people actually have them in some of their paintings, crocodiles. And yet there's no crocodiles there.
There's no crocodiles there.
There's a big chance that a Bunyip was a crocodile, a big crocodile, right? There's even subterranean caves that link up some of these artesian basins that flow underneath those rivers that we know about now, but the Aboriginals knew about as well. And these things could be living in them the same as they do in the sewers in Florida. I mean, you know.
Sure.
Okay, so it could have been a crocodile. It could be part of their mythology. But whatever it is, it's an experience that they believe in, and it could be manifested in certain ways. So that's what the book explores. It explores. It's a fiction book, but it explores the guy in it, the Filipino Chinese Australian guy, Doc, his name is. He's scientific based, and Jax is spiritual based. Because she's part Aboriginal.
Good marriage. Yeah. Good marriage.
Yeah.
So the two of them come up with an answer on each of these mythologies, and it's really up to the reader to discern which way they want to believe. I put forward both elements, and you can make up your own mind at the end of the day. So that's
fascinating.
Yeah.
But
you know the Hairy Men reports. The Hairy Men reports, the Bigfoot, the Yowie reports go back in our culture to the birth of the colony, basically, and beyond that.
On the trail of Yowies,
wow.
Who's that? Who is that?
Who's that story about? We may have interviewed them.
Wayne Lewin.
No, we haven't got to Wayne yet. But I'm very curious about the Bunyip, how far those stories go back in terms of the colonists. And you know, the Bunyip, when you see it on reliefs in Indigenous art, it's a massive-looking creature that looks more like an oversized platypus.
That's it.
Than it does a crocodile.
Precisely. Now, the crocodile probably was a mutilator. So when the colonists came out, they were getting cattle mutilations.
Right.
And it got blamed on the Bunyip.
Right.
Because
I see.
the local Indigenous tribes didn't want to get blamed for it. Right?
Yeah.
Because you know what the colonists would like. They just go out and shoot everybody if they thought that they were being poached.
Yeah.
Poached. So so the crocodiles got blamed. But at the end of the day, the sightings that were made, there was one in 1895, which was near Goulburn, by a person, a British guy that was going down the Goulburn River, and he saw what appeared to be a platypus the size of a horse.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it could have been megafauna. See,
Yes, exactly.
60,000 years ago, or even 40,000 years ago, the Aborigine people would have encountered megafauna.
Megafauna,
of course,
yeah, because they were here.
Yeah. And so that enters into their mythology in a lot of ways.
Of course. Well, not mythology, it's their stories. Yeah.
Yeah.
They're
we have to be careful of the semantics there all the time, because the semantics actually,
mythology
they
means it's made up.
Like
it's
theory
myth,
on the end of conspiracy.
Yeah.
If we digress quickly back to Percy Fawcett, what I was briefly reading yesterday, he seemed to touch on the raw nerve of cryptozoology in his early expeditions. He was talking about, and people were throwing rubbish at him, he was talking about finding pythons that were over 60 foot long. We're well aware that can occur now.
Yeah, they are there.
But he was talking about double-snouted dogs down in the Amazon. Have you heard of any of those stories? Yeah.
You remember the book The Lost World?
Yes.
That was based on Fawcett's discoveries that he'd sent in letters back to his wife. That was written by, I think it was it Arthur Conan Doyle wrote that? I think it was. Yeah.
Yes, it
was.
Yeah. And that was based on what he was doing. He was in those mountain ranges, and Conan Doyle wrote it into dinosaurs and all sorts of things existing there. Yeah. But it all came from him talking to Fawcett's wife and reading the letters of the things that he discovered, that he'd have a runner run the letters out of the jungle on his first expedition. So I mean, there were things in there that he reported. Yeah, like you said, the dogs and the giant creatures. And he was picking up on the natives, what the natives were telling him, which he was trying to do, like what we're saying, with discerning the difference between mythology and realism, because sometimes they cross over, because shaman make them cross over, right?
Exactly.
Totally. Yeah. And also, and then what we've got to look is at the whole, what happened in terms of missionizing those areas, and how much of that spoken narrative has disappeared, has been quashed because of that coming in there.
Yeah.
Gary, this has been the greatest. I really enjoyed your company every time I'm in it, but there is just so much information.
Absolutely.
And I really think too, we'll iron out that little distortion problem. It's not that noticeable enough. It got better and better as the interview went on. But I can't thank you enough for your time. We will it's okay to put in our chat notes those links that you sent me to the albums and your books and all those things. We'll drop those links in the chat.
Yeah.
And I just think how astounding. Do you have moments where you ever wake up now and think, where are you, Percy?
Yeah.
Or do you step into the shower and turn it on and go, please talk to me?
He just stopped.
Yeah.
It stopped abruptly. I got in the shower one day in 1970, middle of 1974. I went to Expo 74 in Spokane, and it somehow broke the connection.
So was it always in the same shower or in any shower?
No, it was any shower. But
shower.
When I went to America, in the north, in Spokane, in America, I was still getting it.
Yeah.
But when I arrived there and we checked into the Davenport Hotel, I'll never forget it. I had a shower, and I'll never forget it, because a guy got killed at a burger joint for $1.25.
God, I'm laughing. I shouldn't be. Stories. I can't believe how good your memory is. $1.25
burger.
$1. That's all he got. That's all that was in the till.
Oh
wow!
It was a donut shop. That's what it was. It was a donut shop.
Oh, God.
Anyhow, and the guy killed him. He shot him, and that was just like, ugh. And I remember I heard it. I heard it in the taxi coming from the airport to the Davenport Hotel in Spokane, and we had an opal exhibit at Expo in the Australian Pavilion, and it was going to be a big deal. And I checked into the hotel, and I was still buzzing on the fact that this guy had been killed. And I had a shower, and there was no Percy, and that was it.
Yeah, right.
Wow.
So I felt that I got such a fright by this guy getting killed that it severed the connection.
That's
the connection.
That's a salient point.
Wow.
Because I think emotion and shock
trauma
has a lot
Some
to do with
trauma.
it. Yeah. And you know what? The interesting thing in magical rituals from day one, water is really important.
Oh, yeah, big time.
It can appear coming down walls and all that sort of stuff. And then the other thing we have to consider is that, you know, you do a statistical study and you'll find that most people have their epiphanous thinking in the bath or the shower because they're literally reverting back to the womb.
Well, it's
their first and greatest place of meditation and thought and some sort of outside of consciousness interaction. So I think absolutely something genuine there. I'm going to do some more research on this, and we're going to get together and we're going to discuss this clearer. And we're going to talk about, you know, going to the office of Kim Fowley and finding that the way that you were going to be charged that day was through a taxi meter. But anyway, that's a whole other great story.
Yeah,
the late great Kim Fowley. You know, they say they're going to build a statue to Nick Cave down in Melbourne. And I go, what has Nick Cave given us in the last 20 years but taken all the black hair dye out of the country? You should have a statue constructed because of just your positivity and what you've done, going in and support to stop kids going into battlefields they shouldn't be in there, to having merit in your art, to bringing people together. The work that I've done with you has all been a communal thing. It's been always about canonizing the people that you work with, keeping those close relationships going, and profound creativity. So we thank you on behalf of Untold Radio and Down South Anomalies for being our guest today, Gary Keady. You're an extraordinary talent. People need to go and search out your albums. They need to search out your literature. And I'm sure all of them at eventually one stage, after reading one of those books or listening to some of your music, will step into the shower and start to channel their own epiphany.
Thank you, mate. Look, the pleasure's been mine. You both of you are just wonderful people, and I treasure the fact that I have you in my life. Thank you.
It's the feeling is mutual, and to be wearing Eraserhead, which is one of my, if not my most favorite film. We used to have a guy in the nursing home, Dickie, who was quite out there on the spectrum. And in the end, he looked a lot like Jack Nance. So we started to do his hair like a Eraserhead just to get by. Anyway. All right.
All right.
Well, look, you've been on Untold Radio. This is episode 77, Lightning Strikes, Bunyips and Percy Fawcett. And I think in some way we covered them all.
We did.
With an astounding Australian creative identity that is Gary Keady. Thank you so much for your time, Gary.
Thank you so much, Gary.
Thank you, my dears.
All right. So we will be back next week with God knows what. We don't know.
All right.
I mean, we always have a bunch of things lined up, but, you know,
well,
life gets in the way sometimes.
We are hoping to have Roger Stankovic back to speak about Havana Syndrome.
Okay.
Yeah.
No problem.
And that's an album I'd like to work on with you, Havana Syndrome. Anyway, we'll talk about that in the future.
All right. We'll be back next week and enjoy. Thanks, Gary, so much.
Okay.
You doing the start titles or the end ones, Asper?
Oh, good God.
Yeah, what are
I've
you
lost
doing
my
there?
mind here. I was about to do the intro
again. Yeah, okay. All right. That's because
we better go.
We're never over Gary.
No,
and
we're
it's
not.
like, let's just start this thing from the beginning. But I'm telling you, at 65, I need to go to the loo.
For sure.
All right.
Me too.
See you next week, kids.
Okay.
Bye.
Cheers. Thanks, Gary.
Bye.